Hi, I'm Charles, and you're watching The State of the Republic. Good evening. Many of you have likely heard the news this week from Parkland, Florida, where 17 people were killed and another 15 injured in yet another mass shooting. In light of this, it is time to once again revisit the issue of guns in America. If you haven't already, I strongly recommend watching some of the statements from the survivors of the tragedy. I will, however, now tell some of my own personal experiences. When I was in high school, we had lockdown drills. It was a regular feature of school that happened at least once a semester. Think about that for a second. In a developed, first world country, we had drills about how to deal with the possibility that someone would come in and try to kill us. This is somehow considered normal in the United States. And lest anyone think that this is somehow normal, no other developed country in the world deals with this as a constant fact of life. Nobody else but us. Fortunately, my school never had something like this happen, but it doesn't change the fact that this situation is completely unacceptable. Yet nothing changes. Mass shooting after mass shooting kills and maims. Yet our government seems incapable of acting. The Sutherland Springs shooting occurred more than 2 months ago, killing 27. Yet no action has been taken. The deadliest mass shooting in U.S. history occurred more than 4 months ago in Las Vegas, killing 58 and injuring hundreds more. But yet, no action has been taken. It has been nearly 2 years since the Orlando Pulse nightclub shooting that killed 50. No action has been taken. It has been over 5 years since the Sandy Hook massacre, where 20 elementary school children and 7 others were killed. No action has been taken. It has been 10 years since the Virginia Tech shootings, which killed 33 people. That shooting led to the only piece of federal gun legislation since 1994, a relatively small law that strengthened the background check system. One piece of legislation in over 25 years. It has been 18 years since the Columbine shootings, which killed 15 people. No major action was taken. America has had 32 mass shootings so far this year. The school shooting in Florida was the 18th school shooting this year. We're in February. We are averaging more than 2 school shootings a week so far. Gun violence claims more than 10,000 lives a year. And adding in suicides, which are made considerably more easily by the available of guns, and the death toll from guns easily clears 30,000 a year. More Americans have been killed by guns since 1968 than in all of America's wars put together. Yet no major policy changes have emerged over the past 25 years. And in fact, gun laws are getting even looser. Clearly, our lack of action on this important issue is not an effective solution. So the question then becomes, what shall we do? There are a variety of options that our government could choose to take. Universal background checks, restoration of the assault weapons ban, which Republicans allowed to expire in the early 2000s, banning high-capacity magazines, banning gun purchases from people on the no-fly list, requiring licensing of gun users, a national gun database, increased funding for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, or Firearms, or, at the very least, allowing the CDC to study gun violence and recommend policy solutions like it would any other public health threat. Yet, none of these things have happened. None of these things have happened despite the fact that these policies all have majority support, and several of them have supermajority support. This lack of action, despite strong majorities in favor of action, can be blamed on the National Rifle Association, its pro-gun fanatic supporters, and the Republicans it elects. To these aforementioned scum of the earth, the responsibility for these tragedies lies with you. The blood of the victims from Parkland, Sutherland Springs, Vegas, Orlando, San Bernardino, Aurora, Sandy Hook, Fort Hood, Virginia Tech, Columbine, and the thousands of other shootings that didn't kill enough to make major headlines in America is all on you. You have allowed murderers and terrorists to get their hands on guns so easily. You have actively fought every effort by the good citizens of this great nation to stop these tragedies from happening. I hope that NRA money is absorbent of liquids, because you're going to need a lot of it to wash the blood off your hands. Now, of course, the gun nuts out there are probably already preparing a poorly spelled, error-riddled, and threatening counter to any sort of substantive action. So I will attempt to rebut as many of these ideas as can come to mind. First up is the complaint that those advocating against further gun violence are politicizing a tragedy. This is not applied to any other kind of tragedy, though. Nobody accuses those who demand better train control after a train crash, better levees after a hurricane, or better drug policy after an overdose of politicizing the tragedy. Politics in a democratic society is how we debate issues and implement policy solutions to improve and protect human lives. To politicize a tragedy by demanding measures to stop the next tragedy from happening is a core bedrock of a democracy and a fundamental American value. Second up is the common tactic of blaming some other factor, like mental health, violent video games, violent movies, lack of school prayer, lack of corporal punishment, or whatever right-wing complaint of the week is for the tragedy. America is not exactly alone in having mentally ill people, or violence in media, or having a separation of church and state. The fact of the matter is that other nations deal with these sort of issues as well, yet somehow do not have endemic gun violence and mass shootings. Third up is the whole good guy with a gun can stop a bad guy with a gun thing. There are multiple problems with this. The vast majority of gun owners are not nearly well-trained enough to respond with any of a level of effectiveness to an assailant, and are far more likely to cause additional harm than to do any good. Separately, even well-trained professionals cannot stop all shootings. Several of the most recent mass shootings have had off-duty police on site when it happens, and attempt to return fire, but be unable to stop the shooter. It is entirely unreasonable for us as a society to try to stop this by arming everyone. Such a situation would be far more likely to result in people shooting each other, whether in personal disputes or simply by accident, than to do anything to substantively stop mass shootings. It is even more unrealistic to try and have security professionals everywhere to stop mass shootings, short of turning America into a modern-day East Germany. Fourth is the old trope about how guns don't kill people, people kill people, and that this somehow means that no action should be taken. Try applying this to literally anything else. Hijacked planes on 9/11 didn't kill people, people kill people. Bombs don't kill people, people kill people. After 9/11, we built up a massive, multi-trillion-dollar national security complex to stop such an attack from ever happening again. And we now all have to take off our shoes before we get on a plane because of that one shoe bomber guy. After the Oklahoma City bombing, the government severely restricted the kind of fertilizer that Timothy McVeigh used to build his bomb. Also, references to the deadliness of car accidents or some other way people die are also fundamentally irrelevant to this discussion. Guns are made expressly for the purpose of killing, and are designed for no other function. Vehicles or other items that are potentially unsafe have common and useful purposes in everyday life, and often have far more oversight in their acquisition and use than guns do. This is another attempt to dodge responsibility. Fourth is the old trope about how if we outlaw guns, only outlaws will have guns. Again, try applying this to literally anything else. If we outlaw murder, only outlaws will murder. If we outlaw grenade launchers, only outlaws will have grenade launchers. If we outlaw poison gas, only outlaws will have poison gas. Such a stupid argument is essentially an invitation for anarchy instead of law and justice, and fundamentally undermines a developed civilization. Fifth is some variation of anti-government paranoia, requiring firearms to stave off authoritarianism, often couched in the possibility of a future tyrannical government, or something about Hitler and Jews. First off, Hitler did not discourage gun ownership, he in fact encouraged it among party members. The Nazi SA paramilitary arm frequently fought with political rivals before Hitler took power, including with firearms and armored cars, generating constant violence in the streets of Germany. If Germany had effective and well-enforced gun control laws, the SA would have been unlikely to be able to inflict significant amounts of violence. Without the unrest and disorder generated by the SA, Hitler's political rise would have been significantly less probable. Furthermore, any attempt to resist a modern-day government and military with regular firearms is an exercise in futility. The U.S. military is the most well-funded and powerful on Earth, with a larger budget than the next 10 nations combined. Not all of that money is wasted on defense contractors, and one could not credibly believe that a bunch of poorly trained and armed anti-government nuts could somehow stand up to the U.S. military. An AR-15 is not going to stop an Abrams tank or a Predator drone. These gun-toting idiots couldn't even effectively stand up to a local police department if they wanted to, in most cases. Sixth is the argument that guns are needed for personal safety reasons. Statistically speaking, the average gun in a home is far more likely to shoot yourself or your loved ones than any intruder, whether it be through a domestic dispute, a suicide, or an accident. Furthermore, it is unimportant how much owning a gun makes some small minority of people feel safer. Public safety is a far more pressing concern. Society is predicated on the egalitarian assumption of doing the most good for the most people, not catering to the irrational fears and beliefs of a few at the expense of the vast majority. Seventh is the argument that guns are somehow overridingly important for cultural reasons. Quite frankly, I don't care how much owning a gun makes you feel better. My right, and the right of other sane Americans to live free of the constant fear of being shot, outweighs your petty concerns about your so-called way of life. We outlaw plenty of things that people might enjoy because they're too dangerous to either themselves or to others. I don't see any major clamor to legalize the purge just because some people might enjoy it, or to legalize the Hunger Games for that matter. Finally, gun nuts will often reach for some form of Second Amendment absolutism. Even in D.C. v. Heller, the case that created the individual right to own a firearm, makes clear that the government still has the authority to regulate guns. No right is ever absolute. One cannot yell fire in a crowded theater without being punished. Also, it should be noted that the Scalia interpretation in D.C. v. Heller is complete garbage and not grounded in anything except NRA propaganda. The Second Amendment does not contain an individual right to own a firearm. I will repeat that. The Second Amendment does not contain an individual right to own a firearm. The Supreme Court, for over 200 years, did not say that the Second Amendment contains an individual right to own a firearm, despite having been given multiple opportunities to rule so over the years. The first appearance of any such argument that the Second Amendment somehow protected an individual right to own a firearm only emerged in 1960. Just because the late Antonin Scalia, may he burn in hell, and his four fellow right-wing pricks decided to pull something out of their ass in the Heller case doesn't mean that it is at all legal, just, or in line with the letter of the law or the intent of the founders. Remember that Plessy v. Ferguson and Dred Scott were also the law of the land once, as decided by the Supreme Court. And in the modern era, the reactionary court has repeatedly made unrealistic, unjust, and illegal decisions like Bush v. Gore, Citizens United, Hobby Lobby, and Shelby County v. Holder. The Second Amendment is for the purposes of establishing state militias. No more, no less. Both the language of the text and the intent of the founders, as found through their correspondence at the time and initial drafts of the amendment itself, make clear that there is nothing whatsoever that would indicate an individual right to own a firearm. The Second Amendment was written to protect state militias for two main purposes: national defense, and in the South to serve as slave patrols, in order to find runaway slaves and put down slave rebellions. So, if you want a gun, go join the military or the National Guard. We, as the rest of society, have the right to protect ourselves against the stupidity of allowing firearms. The conservative former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Warren Burger, originally an appointee of Richard Nixon, stated that the modern NRA-backed interpretation was a fraud against the American people, as is the entire gun lobby and industry, an incredibly bloody and costly fraud. I encourage everyone to donate their time, and if possible, their money, to anti-gun violence groups and politicians willing to take a stand against the NRA and their cronies. We can and must do better. Thank you for watching the program. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more interesting content.